Why does it take so long sometimes for your back pain to go away? And there's a lot of different reasons, but this is probably the main reason, potentially the most important reason, and intriguing when you understand it, although it's not hard to understand. This is one of the problems I had, and I had this problem because I had back pain for so long. It has something to do with how long you have back pain, because the body will start to make changes in the nervous system and to the muscles when you have back pain. And this video is for everybody, so you must watch this video. One vertebrae on top of the other with the disc in between, and more importantly, little facet joints in the back that guide the motion. And they tend to cause a little bit of trouble when you have chronic back pain or you have back pain that's not going away. What do we know? We know the disc is a jelly donut and the disc can move. And as it moves, sometimes it breaks down. You'll develop little fissures and things start to get weaker, and then the vertebrae start to move. And then when the vertebrae start to move, that is the instability. And the instability comes from the abnormal motion of the joint. Vertebrae can move front to back, they can move side to side, and what happens is you start to short circuit the nervous system as these changes and these movements start to happen. What happens is the body or the brain will detect that there is motion around the joint. And when the brain identifies that there's motion around the joint, it'll start to shut down the nerves. The neural drive will decrease. The amount of information being sent to the muscles decreases. That is decreased neural drive. Now, we've talked about different reasons you can have neural drive, but this one is about the joints and when the joints start to move. When they start to move, they'll shut it down. They'll turn it off. Now, there's two things. Number one is the micro movement that we talked about, where the vertebrae can shift, and when they shift, it shuts it down. But another thing is what we all have is pain. So when you have pain in your back, you will get a decreased neural drive to the muscles. And there's one very specific muscle that it happens to. Matter of fact, it happens to this muscle more than any other muscle in the entire body, although it happens to the glutes a lot. But this one we're going to talk about here in a second was one we talked about yesterday. But the brain will shut down the muscle. So the brain detects that there's that motion in there, that's abnormal motion, that's going to cause you some problems, so then it shuts it down. The muscle is the multifidus muscle. It's the small little muscle that runs along the outer portion of the spine, right next to the spinous process, and it controls the motion. It typically just goes a few segments, okay? Holds on to that vertebrae. It's a stabilizer. It's the primary stabilizer for the extension. It's the multifidus muscle. Sits right in here. Sits in this spot right here. So when you get micro motion, micro movement to these little facet joints, and or you get pain, and they will cause, one will cause the other. The micro motion, the micro movement of the vertebrae will cause pain, and that short circuits that muscle. And what happens is you get atrophy. You get muscle weakness. But more importantly, you can physically see this on the MRI. You get what's called fatty infiltration. It's this process where neurologically the muscle slowly starts to shut off. So multifidus is this muscle right here. Okay, we talked about that. What we're looking at right here is we're looking at this muscle sits right in this space right in here. And what happens is the fatty infiltration, as that muscle gets weaker, will start in the middle and then work its way out. So phase one, you'll develop a little fatty infiltration. Muscle gets weaker. Doesn't have the ability to do its job. Muscle gets atrophied. And then what happens over time is it'll slowly fill in more with fatty tissue. This is fat, it's not muscle. And then the third phase is where it fills all the way in. The longer you've had it, the more this happens. So if you had back pain for the very first time last week, you're probably not going to have a lot of this. But if you have back pain for a couple of years, you're going to develop a little fatty tissue. A little longer, a little more fatty tissue. Okay, I had it for 10 years. It's this muscle weakness. And it becomes very difficult then to do activities that require your spine because it becomes so unstable. The muscle doesn't control the way it should. And when the muscle doesn't control the way it should, you're going to start to develop some problems. Simple activities cause you trouble. Very simple activities cause you trouble. So what's the goal? The goal is to eliminate that motion. Okay? Front to back, side to side, and the micro movement. So you want to avoid the the bending, the forced bending, the chronic bending on that vertebrae because the muscles aren't there to hold it. So what's the goal? Goal is bracing, but also bird dog. And this is why for some of you're an extension bias patient and you can't do the bird dog because there's nothing there to hold it. The muscle gets atrophied, you build up the fatty tissue, and then the muscle takes a long time to get better. People say, when am I going to get better? Well, the question is, how much of this do you have? And believe it or not, this is on your MRI. If you have an MRI, this is there. Okay, the radiologists very rarely read it. And the only time they ever read it is when it's this big and they say, oh, something's going on there. But when it's right here, they don't usually say anything about it. They don't say fatty infiltration. Some do, and if you ask them to look for it, if they know what they're doing, they'll find it. They don't always look for it, and they don't always find it. These are things I see all the time. It's the end plate that breaks down. It's the fatty tissue they don't see, and then they see a degenerated disc. Oh, it's normal. That's a normal progression. Well, it doesn't mean that it's not going to cause you pain, because it will if it's unstable. But how do we strengthen that? Well, it's the bird dog. But if you can't do it, there's an introductory exercise where there's less stress. And it's really all just about the bracing. We have to protect our armor. What's our armor? Our armor is our core. Bird dog, it's a core muscle. Okay, multifidus is one of your core muscles. The goal is the continuum. Work it, 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 work it. Okay, there's no easy way around this. There's no magic pill. There's no magic laser. There's no magic decompression. The key is to make that muscle stronger. It takes time. Phase 2, create the stability. How do we do it? Bracing. Work it. Work these muscles. Drive, drive, drive. It takes time. Just be aware it's there, and that's why sometimes it takes a long time. That's what happens. Work that muscle. Again, remember, pain relief is weakness leaving the body. Multifidus atrophy leaving the body.